This is another episode of the vetting process. Today we are here with Eladia Romero. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Josh. I really appreciate you inviting me to be your guest today.
Absolutely. Want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Oh, where do I start? So as you mentioned, I'm Eladia Romero. I wear a lot of different hats. I'm a resident of Leominster. In my professional role, I am the regional manager for Congressman Jim McGovern. So I run his Leominster office. I have been a congressional aide doing this work pretty much for approximately 20 years. I'm coming up on my 20th year. So prior to Congressman McGovern, I worked for Congressman John Olver, who represented the first congressional district. So I've been doing this type of work, political work, I should say, for 20 years. And what that involves is a lot of community engagement, involvement, establishment of relationships, establishment of trust. So I also do a lot of community work, and I'm involved in a lot of different organizations. I sit on different boards, committees, advisory committees, and I am constantly involved in some type of initiative in the community. I'm very, very involved and immersed in the community. And so, yeah, and when I'm not doing that, I'm a full-time mother. I have an 18-year-old that just started her first year in college. She's at Suffolk University in Boston. And I have a 6-year-old who just started first grade. So that is pretty much, I think that pretty much describes me.
What initially got you into the world of politics and helping congressmen?
Oh boy. So I started off, I got my degree in legal studies, and my dream was to be a judge. I was going to be the Ruth Bader Ginsburg of my generation. And I kind of veered off course, and I started working in the legal field as a corporate paralegal. I hated it. It was a lot of paper pushing. I just hated it. The hours, I made good money, but I just didn't like it. So one day, I see this blind ad in the paper asking, just basically saying they're hiring for this position. I didn't know much about it. I go in, I bring my resume. It was for Congressman John Olver. I didn't know who he was at the time, to be honest with you. And I was given the opportunity to interview several times and then finally meet with the congressman. So the congressman says to me, he says, Eladia, why are you interested in the position? Do you have political ambition? Are you going to run for office? Like, what are you interested in? And I said, you know what? I don't even like politics. I just want to be able to help people. So, here we are 20 years later. Would I have said that to the current congressman? No, I would have probably, massaged the message a little bit better. But back then I was in my early 20s. I didn't really pay much attention to the political system. I didn't like politics. I didn't like red tape. But I did like helping people. So I, quit my other job. I started working here in Fitchburg, or I should say I started working in Fitchburg. And the congressman was flexible enough to allow me to kind of mold the position because it had two components. It had the component where I helped constituents, his constituents. So if they needed advocacy or they needed help cutting through the red tape, I did that. But then it also had the outreach component. So it allowed me to get out into the community and start meeting people and start telling people who we were, getting the congressman's name out there, and also connecting the congressman to issues and situations and things that were happening in our community. So it gave me an opportunity to go out there and start branching out. Now, the other thing is I'm pretty sure I was the only Hispanic that had ever held that position. I don't think we ever had another Hispanic. Well, actually we did years later. We hired another Hispanic in another office, but I was the first. And so for me, it was really my priority to reach out to the most disenfranchised and marginalized communities. So it gave me the opportunity to reach out to communities we hadn't reached out to before. So the Spanish speaking community, Hispanics, people of color, just again, not that we hadn't done that, but we hadn't really immersed ourselves in the community. And so because I was familiar with the community, because of, cultural competency, because of who I am, because I spoke Spanish, I was able to do more and broaden and expand on that. And so I've been doing that ever since. So, that's the pretty long answer to how I kind of got to where I am today. But it all started with me telling the congressman that I don't like politics.
And as you mentioned, you do wear a lot of hats, do a lot of work in the community.
Mm-hmm.
How has the pandemic that we're in affected all of that and affected what you do?
Well, first and foremost, I'm working from home. Like many other people, people think that for some reason we work for the government, we work for a member of Congress, like we don't experience the same things that they do, but we do. We have the same concerns. So first of all, it's for our health, our safety. My mom, my relatives, they have pre-existing conditions. So constantly concerned about them being exposed to COVID-19. I have a son who is on the spectrum. As I mentioned, he's 6 and dealing with the whole remote learning, so I'm trying to work full time and then also manage my son at home. I have a senior who couldn't really finish out her senior year. And so I dealt with a senior who had that whole, quarantine 2020 thing going on. She didn't get to graduate until like the end of August. So a lot of my personal life and a lot of the concerns and things, again, that other families that were encountering, I was as well. But I was also working to help other families who were struggling. So I'll give you an example. I was flooded with calls and emails and people seeking assistance with their pandemic, unemployment. So many people were laid off and so many people were desperate and they couldn't get through because the system got completely bogged down by just the sheer number of people who were trying to file at the same time. So I had to help all of those people try to navigate that system and understanding that people were experiencing high levels of stress, trying to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head, and keep their sanity while their kids are home and they're trying to figure out, how am I going to do this remote learning thing? I can't figure it out. In addition to that, again, as I said, I am immersed in the community and I also have strong ties within the Hispanic community. So we had, I dealt with a lot of immigrant families. I dealt with a lot of Spanish speaking families who reached out and said, I can't communicate. This remote learning, I'm not understanding. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to file for unemployment. It's the material, the information is not in my native language, or I can't reach someone that I can speak to. So in addition to just the average person struggling with, issues of, again, just trying to keep a roof over their head and food on their table, I also had the immigrant community who was facing the same issues and hurdles, but then add the language component. So this whole, the whole pandemic has really, I think we're all in this. Everyone is experiencing high levels of stress. Some people are have managed to kind of stay afloat. Many of us are just kind of treading water, just hoping to stay afloat for as long as we can. And then we have some people who actually kind of went underwater. And so the goal is always, for me to make sure that those people who are falling behind, those people who are, finding themselves underwater, we can connect them to the services that they need. So constantly trying to stay on top of what programs are available, what services are available, how can I connect these families who are in need to, if there's a benefit out there that they might be eligible for. So there's been a lot of that. So again, I personally, it's been overwhelming, professionally, it's been overwhelming. I've taken to boxing because I need something to relieve the stress. I'm like stressed out 24/7. So the boxing really helps. So, it's been a really trying time.
For so many people, yeah, that has really, and I can't imagine how, especially your congressman McGovern, I can't imagine how that's shifted and how that's evolved.
Absolutely. So, the congressman has never stopped from day one. I constantly tell him, I was telling him from day one, I said, I get tired just looking at your schedule. I don't know how you actually live it. I don't know how you actually implement this thing. But he has not stopped since day one. The congressman is accustomed to being in the district and being with his constituents and interacting with his constituents. He's not accustomed to sitting behind a computer and, hosting all these Zoom meetings or participating in all these Zoom meetings, but that's what he did. So he got, he was forced to kind of come out of his comfort zone a little bit. And he's done, I think he's done a great job. But as soon as we were able to begin the process, which wasn't too long ago, but, of kind of going out and him having the opportunity to visit food banks, to visit, organizations or small businesses that are struggling. He immediately did that. He stepped up, he's donated masks, he's, reached out to municipalities, he's still doing his job. Again, people think that elected officials, they don't work, or, they're living in some alternate universe or something. No, he gets it, and he understands the struggles, and he understands what people are encountering right now, and he's doing his best to continue to connect with folks and to provide as much help as he can, help them to get through this pandemic.
Right. And you talked a little bit about how you got to work with just how you got this political work, how you started to begin with. What brought you to Congressman McGovern?
So Congressman John Over retired. I was with him for approximately 12 years. It was very, very close. He retired, and then redistricting kicked in. So for those of you, I don't know how old, 10 years ago, how old were you, Josh?
I would have been 4.
You would have been 4. So you were counted on the census when your mom filled it out, I'm sure. But you didn't get to actually fill one out, right? And you won't this time around, but eventually when you turn 18, and you eventually will. So back then, 10 years ago, the census results came out, and it showed that Massachusetts had a steep decline in the number of residents who were living here. Was that accurate? Probably not, but we didn't get complete counts. Not everyone filled out their census. So we lost a member of Congress. We went from 10 to 9. So at the same time, Congressman Over had made the decision that he was going to retire. He had been in office for well over 20 years, I believe, as well. So he retired. So we were left with 9 districts, and redistricting took place. So Congressman McGovern's district, he took over he took over Leominster, he took over Sterling, he took over Athol, he took over a lot of the communities I had already been working with for the previous 12 years. So, or the 12 years prior. So we went through the process. I met with him. I wasn't even sure I wanted to continue doing this work because, quite frankly, it can get very overwhelming at times. So I wasn't sure. But while I was in that transition, people were still reaching out to me. People were still looking for help. And I said, I think this is, God's just telling me this is my calling. I got to do this. So Congressman McGovern brought me over to his staff, and he decided he was going to open an office in Leominster. And so I was able to run that office and work out of his Leominster office. And he has 2 other offices. His main office is in Worcester, so that has never changed. He's always represented Worcester. And he opened an office in Northampton. So that was a new territory for him, a new town, or city or town that he picked up as well. So he had 2 new offices. He had pretty much, he had some new staff coming in, a new district. There was a lot of change, that took place when we first kind of kicked off in the end of 2012, the beginning of 2013. But fortunately, we have been doing our best to, get to as many events as we can in the district, communicate with as many people as possible, and just always have presence and always try to let people know that we're here for them if they need assistance and they want support.
Absolutely. You do a lot of work with undocumented immigrants and people seeking citizenship. Mm-hmm. How, if at all, have you seen has your work changed? Have you seen a shift in what your work is since Trump took office?
Well, interesting enough, I just posted something on social media. So as of October 2nd, the fee to become a naturalized citizen, so a person who has a green card, a legal permanent resident card, who wants to become a citizen has to go through this application process, and you have to pay for it. So it's going from $750 to $1,200. And there used to be a provision that allowed for fee waivers. So, or I should say there is a process in place, but they're trying to get rid of it. So if you were a person who was extremely low income and you couldn't afford to apply to pay for the citizenship application, but you were eligible otherwise, you know, you had been here long enough, you spoke the language, you could read, you know, you could read English, you know, get through an interview, you didn't have a criminal record that involved felonies, and, you know, so on and so forth. You had to meet all the eligibility criteria. You pay this fee, you go through the process, you pass the test, you go through the ceremony, you get naturalized, and you are a U.S. citizen. Well, the fee clearly, the increase and then the fee waiver going away will prevent many immigrants from naturalizing, from being able to take, you know, go through that process. Many immigrants, I shouldn't say, I'm not saying all, but many immigrants are, you know, minimum wage earners or lower income earners, right? And so, you know, for them to pay $1,200 for an application, it's a financial hardship for many of those folks, particularly our elderly people, because many older people want to naturalize. They've been here long enough. So there's that piece. And then folks just in general, you know, afraid to go through the process. People who have green cards, who've been here for a really long time, who have never even had an incident with law enforcement, have never been stopped by, they don't even have a parking ticket. They're still afraid. Like, they still will call and ask me and say, am I going to get deported? I had this one woman tell me, she was an elderly woman, that she couldn't take free transportation. She couldn't take it to the program or wherever she wanted to volunteer at, because free transportation meant that she was a public charge, and she had a green card, and it would mean she could get deported. And I'm thinking to myself, what? Like, where would this come from? You know, so there's so many floating ideas out there, but there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety amongst our immigrant community. They feel targeted. They feel unwanted. You know, they feel like, you know, this administration has, you know, particularly, you know, Latinos, they feel as if they've been made to feel as if they're not part of this country. Like this administration sees them as not contributing members of society, which is anything but. I mean, immigrants, all the immigrants that I've encountered, you know, they work tremendously hard. They do the jobs that many of us cannot and will not do, you know, and they do it every day, and they do it with pride. And oftentimes they do it for far less money than their counterparts, but they do it. So, you know, it's unfortunate, but all we can pray for is, you know, the election is around the corner, November 3rd, and hopefully enough people are engaged and motivated and energized to change the course, the direction of this country, you know, change the narrative.
Yeah. You had a chance to go down to the border at some point, I believe.
Yes, I did.
What was that like? What did you see? What was that like?
You know, that, I have to say, of all the congressional trips that I've taken, that one I think probably had the most impact on me, because of what I encountered. So we were at one of the crossings between Mexico and Texas. And as we were touring kind of where, you know, people who are undocumented trying to pass through, or they come in contact with Customs and Border Patrol, they wind up in custody. There's like a holding cell of sorts, we could say. So we're touring this place, you know, and they're showing us kind of some of the things that people try to pass through the border and so on and so forth. And suddenly we turn around and there's like this, it's this like, this glass where we could see in. I'm not sure they could see us. So as we turn around, we see all these young women on like the cement floor. They have like these little blankets or whatever. They're all like kind of sitting, and they're all, you know, kind of hunched together in their little spaces or whatever. And I mean, these girls were, they look like my daughter's age, you know, 17, 18 years old. One girl was crying hysterically, and I will never forget her. And she's like looking at me, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, as a mother, I just want to go over and hug her. I just want to say to her, like, it's going to be okay, you know. We heard from them that, you know, from CBP about, you know, it's not our job to provide food, but we do, you know, we give them occasional, you know, these bathroom breaks. They have to go in groups. We don't have to provide feminine products. We don't have to provide toiletries. And I'm thinking, how long have these people been here? You know? And so, you know, there was a varying amounts of time that these young women had been there, but still, like, no dignity, no, I mean, it was just awful. And then in a separate room, there was a mother with a young little girl, and the little girl, she could see us, and we could, you know, we could see each other, and she's like waving, playing a game of like, I see you, you know, like. And I think to myself, and it was just her and her mother, and she couldn't have been, she was probably my son's age, probably like 6. And I see this young girl, and I think to myself, she's sitting in a room with her mother. There's no TV, there's no video games, there's nothing. It's just her and her mother. How long has this little girl been sitting in this cell with her mother? And how much longer will she be there? And there was, you know, so immediately they kind of scurried us out, and they were like, you know, you can't interact with them, and you can't take pictures here, and so on and so forth. But leaving that place just left such an impact on me, because it was almost like dehumanizing. It was like we were treating these people like they were worthless. You know, it was probably their first interaction with, you know, the United States government. And that was the manner in which they were held. You know, I mean, you're sitting in this concrete cell. They're like, we don't have to give them feminine products. I mean, they're young girl. I mean, it was mind blowing to me. But it was also just heart wrenching, you know, just, again, the mother in me kicks in and says, I just want to hug them and tell them they're going to be okay. But to be honest with you, I really couldn't even give them that guarantee, because I didn't know, you know, I didn't know what their fate held for them. You know, I didn't know what CBP was going to do with them, what the next step in this process was for them. So it was very challenging.
I can't imagine, but I feel like they should have an obligation to provide those basic necessities, and yet they claim they don't.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, they were complaining to us about how they needed more money from Congress so that they could feed them, because they were going out of their way to provide meals, because CBP didn't have they didn't have like a cafeteria. They don't have like meals delivered to them. So it was their responsibility to go out and, I guess, get food to provide for them. So I don't know if these people had 3 meals a day. I don't know. You know, I didn't see a place where they could shower. I don't think they were able to shower, you know. I didn't see beds, so I don't know where they slept. I assume they just slept on the floor. And it didn't faze them. It wasn't like, you know, they looked at them and they looked at the situation as if, you know, what's the big deal? Again, it was very dehumanizing for any person, you know, and it was just really sad to see. And not only that, but I think, as the congressman has said in the past, many of these young girls who make this trek here from other countries, particularly from Central America, they can be raped, beaten, tortured along the way numerous times. This is not like a straight, you know, oh, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive to the border and I'm just going to walk over and hope and pray that they're going to let me in. I mean, these young women oftentimes risk their lives, and they are, again, raped and they are tortured, oftentimes going without food. So then to get to the United States, and this is what you encounter, like more dehumanizing behavior, you know, more, you're not worth, you know, I don't care that you've walked however many thousands and thousands of miles. I don't really care. You're here and we don't owe you anything and you're not entitled to anything. And we're going to treat you like a dog, or maybe we might treat our dogs better than we treat you. And it's just, all of those things come into play. It was awful. It was awful. It was just an awful experience. Glad I was able to witness it, because people said it wasn't real. So I was able to verify it was real. But then also just it's just one of those things, again, you can't forget.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of stories of people going down to the border and seeing similar things, seeing these people. I believe Joe Henry III was among them going down. And did you go with?
Jim actually went down. I went down first. I went with a congressional delegation, and then Jim went down with a set, like, members of Congress, maybe a month or so after I had gone down. So I went before he did, but he went on a separate trip, and he went to a different location. I think one of the more publicized locations, where there's like a lot more traffic and there's a lot more detainees in that particular location.
And after Congressman McGovern went and saw whatever it is he saw, did you notice any change in plan or any legislative action taken, or like just any even ideas thrown out there as to how to improve this?
It's been a while, so I can't remember. I mean, I'm confident that there were letters that were circulated amongst members of Congress. To that I'm absolutely positive. That talked about the conditions under which these people were detained, and talked about, how they, how CBP needed to do better. And there's been numerous times where Jim, along with other members of Congress, have reached out to CBP to ask questions, what's going on? We're hearing reports on XYZ and so on and so forth. But as you know, to pass legislation, you need both chambers of Congress to come to some kind of agreement so that you can move forward. And under the current conditions that we find ourselves in, with, the constant, it's almost like sometimes there is no middle ground between Democrats and Republicans. It's extremely hard to get any kind of legislation passed, particularly when it comes to immigration. And that has been the case, I think, probably for the past 4 years. So, to be honest with you, if I had to guess, I don't think any real legislation was passed, but there were probably strongly worded letters that were written to the administration and written to, the head of CBP. And number one, probably, asking for information. And number two, demanding that these people be treated in a humane way.
And I think, I know Jim was concerned about this. He hears about issues a lot. He hears about human rights a lot. But I think it might be it's good to hear as a constituent of him that he was concerned, that he did, if he at the very least tried, that sort of thing. It's good to hear that he was willing to try, and that he knew at the very least.
One of the things that when I'm with Jim and he has office hours and people say to him, those illegal immigrants, they're coming here and they're, they make these insane allegations. And the congressman will always point out to them and say, listen, do you think that these people are risking their lives and they're coming here because they want to, or because it's out of necessity? He said, if a gang showed up at your door and said, if your son doesn't sell drugs for us, we're going to kill you and the rest of your family, and we're going to take them anyways. So either you give us your son and let him do what he needs to do, we do it the easy way, we do it the hard way. Or if they said to you, give me your daughter, I'm going to prostitute her on the street, and if you don't, I'm going to beat and torture and rape your wife, I'm going to kill your other kids, and I'm going to make you watch, and I'm going to take her after I'm done. What would you do? Would you do anything within your power and control to protect your children? And people are like, yeah, absolutely. He says, well, what do you think many of these people are doing? What do you think they're doing? This is out of desperation. People are not fleeing here with their kids, risking their lives because, you know, they want to come here for vacation. This is out of pure necessity. This is out of pure desperation. And I think that is the truth. And he understands it. He's been to Honduras, El Salvador. He's been to, you know, these areas where the majority of our immigrants from Central America come from, you know, Honduras, you know, and he's witnessed it. He's witnessed the conditions under which people live. So he gets it. And he's not afraid to say that, even if they're his supporters and they speak, you know, they make these, you know, just outlandish accusations about undocumented folks, he'll correct them, you know, and that's what I admire about him, is that he's a man of integrity. And not only that, sometimes, you know, he may not, his opinion or his position may not be the popular one in the room at the time, but I can guarantee you that it's always the right one. I know that with Jim, his position on things, even if, you know, he may start at A and then you may come in and you may convince him and he may sway a little bit, but it's always on the right side. He's always on the right side and he's always doing the right thing. And that's one thing that I can assure you of. And that's one thing that I respect and admire most about him.
Evan's always been very admirable in that sense. I remember like when my mom worked with him and when, you know, just hearing about him, he's always been he's a very admirable individual.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When I tell people that he slept at a homeless shelter, they don't believe me. And I said, he may be one of the only members of Congress that has done that. And why? He didn't do it for publicity. He didn't do it for a publicity stunt, but he's like, I'm going to advocate for homeless people. I should know what they go through, right? I should see it firsthand. I should be able to speak to them, you know? And so that's what he did. And, you know, a person who can just kind of get down in the weeds, you know, and get down to your level, you know? So like I always say with Jim, he could be in the room with Nancy Pelosi and a janitor who's assigned to clean that room. And he might be engaged in that conversation with the janitor and Nancy Pelosi is standing next to him. He will not take his focus away from the person, and he will end that conversation with that janitor. And he will respect them in the same way he would respect Nancy Pelosi. He does not see anyone as being beneath him. He does not see anyone as other than his equal. And he treats you that way. So the same way that he treats people with respect, you know, he earns people's respect, and you may disagree with him, but at the end of the day, you can at least respect him as a man, respect him as a person, because he you know, he's entitled to it. He's earned it, basically.
Right. On a bit of an off-topic note, you are part of, I believe it's the MPU show. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so again, with all the many different hats that I wear, I have been able to work with the group called Massachusetts Parents United on my own time. Like, you know, it's my personal thing, but it also brings me almost like the most gratitude and you know, I'm very passionate about it. And the reason being is that Massachusetts Parents United has helped create a platform for parents. And this platform we've used it, I've used it, to organize parents in Fitchburg, Leominster, and partly Gardner. Gardner's a little more challenging, but mainly Fitchburg and Leominster. Parents who haven't typically been brought to the table, or parents who have not typically advocated or don't know how to advocate for their children or their grandchildren, have come to the table. And they've engaged in conversations with, like, Natalie Higgins, school committee members, Dean Mazzarella, the superintendents, directors of special education. I mean, real conversations where they're talking about the struggles that they're encountering with remote learning and providing suggestions on things that they think could be helpful for them and for maybe other families. And for many of these families, it's the first time they've been given a platform, an opportunity to interact in that way. MPU also supports us by providing the interpreters. So the meetings that we have, we're able to conduct bilingually. So we can have it in Spanish, we can have Portuguese, actually we can have many different languages as needed. So what happens is we have the meeting with folks who speak English, And as the meeting is taking place, there's, these folks are engaged in the conversation, they're engaged in the meeting, and they're listening through an interpreter. So they get to fully engage and participate. So if they have questions, they can, ask the question in their language. We translate it. We translate the response. So they're fully, the opportunity for them to engage is fully there. And so again, for many of these parents, it's the first time. So we're pulling in people who haven't typically had a voice, who, just have wanted to be engaged and wanted, every parent wants the best for their child. How you go about achieving that sometimes can be challenging, particularly if there's a language barrier. So being able to eliminate all of that and just give them the floor to do that has been just so gratifying, because, they're appreciative, and it just makes them become more engaged. Like, I want to do this more often, and I want to do this for my child. So for instance, many of the parents who participated in those meetings have reached out to me about some of the struggles they're encountering now with remote learning. So I've encouraged them, reach out to your teacher, or reach out to so-and-so, or reach out to this person. And they are. Whereas in the past, they would not do that because they didn't feel comfortable with the process. So we're slowly but surely, kind of making inroads in the community. And just trying to pull parents in as much as possible, get them involved in the process. So for me, again, that's why it's just been very, very rewarding being able to do that work.
Absolutely. And the last real question I have for you here is, you've done a lot of work with politicians, with advocacy groups, with all sorts of things. You've worn a lot of hats. Have you ever considered running for office yourself?
Did your mom tell you to ask me that?
Possibly, yes.
Wendy. So for many years, I've sat behind the desk, and I've advocated for constituents during that whole time. And I've always felt, I think up until recently, that the best role for me was behind the desk, because I could be more effective, because I can get results, right? By advocating it to an agency, I can get things done. And then on the political side, saying like, oh, as an elected official, I have to deal with all the crap, and I got to, just the red tape, and I got to go through all of that. And by the time you pass legislation, it impacts people. It's, it's going to take longer than me just picking up a phone and fixing problems. But this past year, with everything that's happened, and, the demands for social justice, and the demand for, for people of color to be at the table when decisions are being made, for people of color to be included in these important conversations at all levels of government, in healthcare, in education, and in all areas of life, right? It's made me really kind of rethink my position and say, as much as I love advocating for people and resolving people's issues, it's very gratifying as well. I need to be sure that every single person has a voice at the table. Every single person is represented, not just a select few, but everyone. And so for me, I look around and I look at candidates and I say to myself, first of all, the candidates don't look like me. They don't speak like me. They're not involved in the community or connected to the community in the same way that I am. And so I want to step out from behind the desk and say, maybe it is time for me to step out and be that representative for all people, because people are tired, and people are losing faith in the political system. People are losing faith in our government. And so for me, being a person who people trust, I think many people I've worked with, they've expressed that they trust me, and they know that I have their best interests at heart. I want to be able to get people to understand that the government can work for them, that the government is for them. It's a government by the people, for the people, right? Like, this is, you elect people. We work for you, right? Like, you have to be a part of the process. But if we don't engage people in that way, and we don't make them feel a part of the process, they're not going to participate in the process. And I want to stop the bleeding. I want to stop people from, leaving the not being involved. I want more people to be involved. I want more people at the table. So for me, I really have been considering, looking at, running for office. I'm not sure which office. I kind of have my eye on a couple things going on. But ultimately, it has to do with the fact that, I love this city. I love this area. I love the work that I do. And again, I want a voice. I want to be a voice for everyone, like I've been doing, but I think maybe on a larger scale.
Absolutely, yeah. So do you think in the next few years we're going to be able to vote for you for something? Are we going to be able to...
How old are you now, Josh?
Not me specifically. I'm 14.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
not
within
me.
the next 4 years, I think you'll be able to vote for me. We can, I think you'll see my name on the ballot at some point, so.
Yeah.
So whether it's the next 2 years or whether it's the next 4 years, is yet to be determined. But I think at the end of the day, unless things change drastically, and unless our representatives, and I'm not speaking for McGovern because I think he does an excellent job. First of all, his staff is very diverse. And so he makes sure, and he himself is very involved and entrenched in the community. But I think unless the representatives, on all levels of government start to look more like, we start to be inclusive of people of color. We start to be more representative and the voice that's encompassing of everyone. I think that just encourages me more to run. But if we were to have people who, again, started expanding, then it might not be for me. But that's not the direction that we seem to be going in. It seems to be that, our city council, our school committees are, just straight up the, straight up to the top, it doesn't look, it's not reflective of our community. It's not reflective of all people. It's just reflective of a select few. And we really have to change that. So, I hope that, my plan is to hopefully, perhaps run for office one day, but I hope that others will also do the same. Others that represent disenfranchised communities, special needs communities, people of color, people who are social, economically disadvantaged folks, just all across the board, because we need to have different perspectives and we need to have representation of everyone, for everyone. So we just have to work to try to find who these people are and again, give them a platform and build them up and help support them. Absolutely.
And so
if I do run, are you gonna? I hope you'll work on my campaign.
Oh, absolutely. I'm all for it. Yeah.
Good.
So next up here, I just to finish this off, I have a little bit of a lightning round. This is what you can include in your campaign videos. I've got a couple of topics here, and in around 2 sentences or less, I want your quick thoughts on them.
Okay.
So the first topic we have here is climate change.
Oh. Okay. Oh, just 2 sentences. We got to make it better, and we have to do better to save our world.
Just so you know, I interview politicians. Most people owe over 2 sentences.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to think. I'm like, climate, but climate change is real. We got to do stuff to fix it.
Issue number 2: the woman's right to choose.
Ooh, 2 sentences. Let's see. Women's right to choose. My body, my choice.
Absolutely. Issue number 3, something we've talked about a little bit: immigration.
Immigration. Immigrants contribute to our society in many different ways.
Absolutely. I was tempted to say immigrants get the job done. I've been watching too much Hamilton.
No,
But
I'm like, yeah, but I feel like because they do more than just the work. They contribute in terms of the culture. They contribute in terms of, many of them are involved in their churches and community service. So it's not just work. I mean, they add so much to our country and society. So it's beyond work. It's
uh,
fantastic.
issue number 4, police reform.
Very much necessary, must be done immediately.
Issue number 5, the Black Lives Matter movement.
Very much necessary, must continue in order to have effective change.
Issue number 6, LGBT plus rights.
When we say everyone is, equal, it means everyone. So everyone is equal and everyone deserves equal rights.
Issue number 7, universal health care.
Should that even be a question? It's
It shouldn't be, but it unfortunately has to be.
Right. So basically my rhetorical question is, should it be a question? Universal health care should not be a question. Healthcare is a right. It's a right, and everyone should have healthcare.
Arguably the hardest question I've asked yet: which flavor of ice cream is the best?
Of course, chocolate.
That's a good answer. That's one of the better answers I've gotten.
I'm easy.
Well, that's about all I've got here today. Thank you so much for coming on and answering my questions.
Oh, well, thank you. This was a lot of fun. So thank you so much for having me. Anytime that you want to have me back on, please do. And I have you on my volunteer list already. So just, when the time comes, I'll be reaching out. Just be on the lookout.
I mean, I'll be reaching out too. Once you've won office, I'll definitely be doing another episode on you.
Fantastic. I'll look forward to that. Well, thank you so much. It's been great chatting with you. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.